Hello everyone, Jester Bell is back, and I've just seen Thor Love and Thunder, and if you've been watching my channel, you know that I had very low expectations for that movie. So I've seen the movie, and it was not as bad as I expected, but it was still bad. Let's talk about the movie though. My big fear going into it was that it was going to character assassinate Thor, that it was going to tear him down and turn him into an idiot and make him quit being a hero in favor of building up Jane Foster's Thor, since that seems to be kind of the strategy that Disney and Marvel have been using to prop up new characters and new superheroes. So while the movie definitely seemed to turn Thor into an idiot for much of it, it did not assassinate his character in the way that I thought it would. He's still very heroic in the film. He still has a lot of heart. He is not the guy you saw in Avengers Endgame who had given up on anything, on everything. He comes out of that and he gets in shape and he's being a hero again. And so I enjoyed that. But the movie still definitely mischaracterizes Thor a bit and does turn him into kind of an idiot. I would call it a bit more of an inconsistent characterization, but it just does so much to try to go for the joke in the film. But I'll get more to Thor's characterization in a minute. The big thing about this film is that it was comedy first. It's like I didn't even come out of the movie thinking that it had a plot. It had a premise. They told a bunch of jokes in that premise, and then by like a third into the film, they'd remember, oh, we have a plot to tell. We actually kind of have to have a story, and they get back to that. When Taika Waititi said that this movie was like a 10-year-old or a 7-year-old made it, he wasn't kidding. But I'm not meaning by the kind of jokes and that were going to be told in the film. It was not nearly as cringe as I thought it would be. But just as when a 7-year-old or a little kid is coming up with a story, they kind of just make things up as they go along, whatever pops into their mind. And that's how I felt about this movie. And I think the best example of that would be the whole sequence with Zeus. It didn't matter to anything. It's like they're like, oh, well, the children have been captured, so we got to go get help. They go to Zeus, and there's this whole comedy sequence where Thor loses his clothes, where they see that the people are selfish, which ties a bit into the theme of the movie, but ultimately doesn't really matter. And so there's this big action sequence, and they come out of it, and then they're like, well, I guess we just don't have a plan now. Let's go see Gore. And it's like that's a perfect example of how this movie is. It's like stuff keeps just happening and happening and happening, and ultimately it doesn't matter. Interestingly, what I liked about the movie the most was number one, Gore, that character played by Christian Bale. I wish that we got more of him because it seemed like he had a really interesting story and he played him very well and very intimidatingly. And like I said, I just wish that there was more of him. But once again, they could have made such an interesting story if they just had focused more on his character and that plot line more. But the movie is more of an excuse just to tell jokes. The other thing I liked surprisingly is I liked the story with Jane Foster's Thor. Once again, I thought it was going to be something just done to subvert expectations and tear down the original Thor's character, but no, they actually do have a heartfelt story in there that Jane Foster is dying from stage 4 cancer, and that she becomes Thor because of a spell that Thor had put on Mjolnir to protect her, but that it becomes her using that as the last hours of her life to try to do something good. And it's a really heartfelt theme and story to do there. But unfortunately, they don't do very much with it. It's like it forgets that part of her character that she's suffering from cancer for a good bulk of the film, and then finally goes back to it and decides to do something with that by the final third of the film. And that's a huge problem to me. I'm like, this could have been so much more meaningful if they kept it as a theme throughout the movie that it was exploring more. But it's like the movie begrudgingly goes back to having some more drama in it when it really just wants to be about the jokes. And when it comes to the jokes, Taika Waititi's comedy, I loved the first Ragnarok. I admit the writing flaws with that film. I kind of brushed a lot of it off because I was understanding that they hadn't had a hit Thor film and they wanted to finally get one. So I understood why they made a lot of changes, even though it was a huge risk. But I thought that Thor movie was funny, and I thought that it kept Thor in character, sort of as being a bit more comedic in that he's trying to get away from the insanity that's happening around him and save his people. But this movie made him a part of the insanity. Like he's by the end of the film, he's showing more of his heart and more more of his human side. But the movie would just turn him into a complete cartoon when it needed him to be. Like in the beginning, when he can't understand that the Guardians don't actually like him and want to get rid of him, he just seems to have no self-awareness. Or when he goes and sees Zeus, he doesn't have any understanding that this might be a bad idea. He's just a buffoon. But like I said, the movie kind of pulls back on it and turns him into a more heartfelt character by the end of the film. So another example of they did everything just to go for the joke, even if it was a sacrifice of characterization and story. And even Jane Foster, I thought she was good at the dramatic moments because Natalie Portman is a dramatic actress, but I did not think she worked when she was trying to pull off comedy at all. And the comedy in the movie, just, I found it very funny in Ragnarok. Again, sue me, arrest me for my crimes against humanity, because that's what took Thor onto this path where he's a complete idiot. But I just did not find the comedy very funny in this movie. There were about like 3 moments I think I laughed at. I was a bit more frustrated and even just bored through some of the film where I felt like I was enduring it and there was not really much for me to latch on. There was not really much for me to latch onto in the film. I also want to point out that this is the first Thor film that doesn't have Loki to use as a crutch, and it was really that dynamic between Thor and Loki that sold the Thor films in the first place, but that's not here at all. And while I think that once again they had some good stuff going on with Natalie Portman's Jane Foster near to the end of the film, Valkyrie, Korg, they're just not good supporting characters. And if you're watching it just from the perspective of the film, it feels like they're only there because they were in the last film. There's no reason for Valkyrie to be king of Asgard. But if you know on a meta level, why is Korg in Thor? Well, it's because he's voiced by the director. Why is Valkyrie in Thor? Well, because she did a threesome with the director, and that just, their characters just are not strong enough. I actually wasn't as annoyed with Valkyrie in this movie, even though I really don't like her character, but Korg was so insufferable that there's a moment in the film where they make you think that he's dead, and I actually felt a sense of euphoria. I was like, yes, but he's not dead, and he literally becomes a talking head. And I was like, no. So the movie's muddled. It just, things happen at random. The style of the film is trying to lean towards more of an 80s thing, and that was really a big part of the marketing. But the most 80s it gets is in the end credits. Throughout the movie, though, it was like when a character is wearing a costume as an alien or to portray an animal, you know it's a costume. It looks very fake. The CGI in this movie looks very fake as well. So it looks like a very cheap production despite being a very multi-million dollar movie. I'm sorry. But it kind of feels like in Ragnarok they do this little gag where they're doing a very cheaply produced play recapping the events of Dark World, and it's supposed to be a joke, and they do that again in this movie to recap the events of Ragnarok and Infinity War. And I'm like, this is what the movie is. It's like that cheap play you see where everything is cheaply produced, going for a cheap gag that most of the time isn't very funny. So, and when we're at the end of the movie, here's a big spoiler, I suppose. Thor adopts a daughter, the daughter of Gore, who is brought back to life. And so it's a nice little dynamic, but I'm kind of wondering, okay, they're kind of teasing a sequel to Thor's character, but where does he go now? He's still a hero, he's still doing his thing. Now he has sort of a legacy character with him, but I'm not really sure where we're going with this, and I think that's why people are starting to be more critical of Marvel films now than they were, because before we were all invested because even when Marvel movies would stumble, we know that it was an interconnected story and we were getting somewhere. But now I don't know where we're going with this, and I think that is what's really hurting Marvel. They don't have that little trampoline to fall back on or bounce back on. They're there to be entertaining. But I think that this movie 100% depends on if you like that kind of humor or not. I think little kids will probably like it the most. There was some humor that was inappropriate, like, the Thor flashes the camera, but it was not nearly as bad as people were making it out to be, but some parents might have a problem with that. But overall, this is a movie that exists. It's not very good. It didn't make me feel mad like I thought it would. It doesn't assassinate Thor in the sense that he's not a hero anymore, but it does assassinate him in the sense that he's still just used as a joke, and that's really frustrating. And I also am frustrated that they gave Taika Waititi so much control over this film. He went completely for the jokes constantly, and that we had a really great plot with Jane Foster having cancer and what she would do in the last moments of her life, and with Gore, but that was sacrificed just to tell more forgettable jokes. The last thing I want to say about the film is they've kind of made the idea of being worthy with Mjolnir a bit pointless, because now Jane Foster can wield Mjolnir because Thor put a protection spell on it to come to her aid, and that the movie makes an argument that Jane is actually worthy of the hammer. Okay, but then it makes it so that Thor uses some of Zeus's power, I guess, and he gives the kids temporarily his power so that they can fight. And by the end, I think we see his adopted daughter fighting with Mjolnir. So, you know, it used to be a big deal when Captain America or Vision could pick up the hammer, because barely any character could, and would say a lot about that character, but now it apparently is not that hard to be worthy. Anyway, Marvel's really going downhill. It's been for a while. I'm not surprised by this. It's not the worst movie ever made, but it's not good at all. I would give it a 3 out of 10, I would say. I still am really entertained by Chris Hemsworth, and there were parts of the movie that really showed its potential and that I enjoyed, but it overall is not a great direction for the MCU right now. Did you enjoy Thor 4? Did you think it was hilarious? Let me know in the comments below. Please like and subscribe for more videos, and I will see you guys next time.